Cool. Welcome, everybody. My name is Anne-Claire Bianco. I'm part of the Microsoft for Startup team. We are delighted to have you today for this Building Responsible AI startup solution. So two things before we kick off. You have the opportunity to ask any question on the chat. We have three colleagues who will be there to answer your questions live. If your question is not answered, you also have the ability to book a technical session with our Azure pairing team through Founders Hub, but we will put all of the link for you on the chat. So now, without further ado, I have my colleague Vinayak Hedge, who will be introducing in detail what's going to happen for you within the next hours. Vinayak, the floor is yours.
Thanks, AC. Hi, everyone. My name is Vinayak Hegde, and I'm on the CTO in residence at Microsoft for Startups. Microsoft for Startups is a global team which works with startups everywhere. Today, we are going to talk about responsible AI. So maybe what I can do is I do a quick introduction. So while we are at the dawn of the AI revolution, and it does seem that AI will be embedded into the fabric of our society, very similar to the internet, it's really important to think about the human impact of AI, right? So there has been an ongoing discussion about the ethical implications, the risks, and also the opportunity of AI. As a startup, there is sometimes a tendency to ignore some aspects of software development, such as security or responsible AI, as a trade-off to build features fast, right? And Startups or founders that do so will do so at their own peril, right? If software, specifically the AI components, are not fair, transparent, and accountable, then you will have a tough time convincing a buyer panel of enterprise companies. And this is because it will affect their internal systems and their users, and they are very conscious of it. This is especially true in regulated industries such as fintech, insurtech, and healthcare, which have a high human impact and where the cost of failure is high. Similarly, if you are a consumer app, then not taking into consideration these aspects while implementing features will also lead to the exclusion and alienation of some users, which will definitely impact growth and increase your reputational risk and also the chances of failure. So today we will discuss responsible AI in two different talks, which will cover different facets of responsible AI. The first one will focus on building and using generative AI responsibly with Microsoft Azure by Deb Adiogba, who is a senior PM at AI Platforms, Customer Experience Engineering. Her talk will focus on the frameworks and principles of responsible AI. This will be followed by the use cases and demos of how to use different tools to achieve this, right? While the first talks will talk about the why and the what, the second talk will focus on the how. And this talk will be given by Ruth Yakubu, who is the principal cloud advocate. You can ask your questions in the chat, and we will be answering them as we go along. We'll also be posting a recording and links that we reference in the talk post the webinar. So with that, I will hand over to my colleague Deb, who will talk about the first talk.
I'm a senior program manager for the AI platform under the Customer Experience Engineering team. Today, we'll discuss how Microsoft approaches building generative AI applications responsibly and how we also empower others through tooling in Azure AI. AI is obviously a hot topic today. Like me, you've probably seen it in the news all the time, maybe every day. In this new era of AI and rapid innovation, considering safety is not an optional feature, it's a requirement. This is not new for Microsoft. AI innovation and innovation in responsible AI is something that we've been doing for many, many years now. It's been a journey going from early ideas and research to where we are today, which is a point where we are operationalizing responsible AI. And we feel absolutely prepared to meet this very exciting moment and to enable customers to meet this moment too. And so in 2023, you've probably seen more and more announcements from Microsoft, from launching new responsible AI tools to making new external commitments about how we're going to implement responsible AI, and also launching new organizations to further AI safety in the world. So it's an incredibly exciting time in the field of responsible AI. That's also why I think it's helpful to take a step back and look at where we started. We started with the idea of principles, and principles are still incredibly important in responsible AI because they tell us where we want to go. and what we want every AI system to achieve. We've had these principles for a while now, and they haven't changed. They have been our constant North Star, but also we've been busy at work figuring out how to put these principles into practice. And one of the things we found along the way is that it's not possible to do all this in just one discipline. It is a major active innovation to go from the concept of a principle like fairness to putting that into practice in a complete application. And so to do this, we found that we needed to innovate across 3 different dimensions. We take the best and cutting edge ideas from research and are constantly exploring new ideas in research. We combine that with thinking about policy and engagement with policy leaders around the world. And then we determine where we want to go with engineering expertise in terms of what's actually going to be feasible, what's going to scale, what's going to work for a particular application. Co-innovating across these 3 dimensions has helped us figure out how to solve our responsible AI challenges in a more disciplined, collaborative way. It's taken time for us to find the right balance across these disciplines and feel like we've gotten this pattern of responsible AI governance right. We published our first version of our responsible AI standard back in fall of 2019. It had absolutely great intent. It was saying, okay, you need to achieve these principles in your system. So for example, you should go and make your system fair. But the problem was it was lacking information on how you actually go and do that. And more importantly, how do you know when you've done enough? We've come a long way since that first version of the standard. We made improvements based on our experiences, actually implementing it when building our technologies. And we produced a second version of our standard in fall of 2021, which is still the one we're using today and is public and something that you can go look at yourself if you want to learn how Microsoft is doing it. In this new version, it's more procedural, giving teams more prescriptive instructions on how to implement each of the principles. We found it's actually incredibly important to have that kind of structure to support our innovation and responsible AI at scale. And so let's talk a little bit about what the standard looks like. Here you can see we've taken our principles and we've broken them down into goals, which is saying within each principle, what are the things that we want to achieve in an AI system? So here are the goals overall. So now let me talk a little bit about why this is important. Our principles tell us where we want to go, but the goals are telling us what are the specific outcomes we need to secure in the system to achieve that principle. And so the outcomes are high level and will apply to many applications and many different technologies. At the next level, the requirements might vary some by the technology or the application, but they are still going to be a common theme across most situations. And this is incredibly important because if we didn't have this structure and every application was completely different, we wouldn't be able to make repeatable tools and practices. And the ability to turn this standard into repeatable tools and technologies and practices is what's enabled us to actually be doing responsible AI at scale and innovating quickly in this space. Let's explore an example specifically with our 3 fairness goals to make this a bit more concrete. There's different types of fairness, for instance, where we can think about the use of the technology, where using the technology, you might reinforce existing power structures and cause some type of unfairness. Here, we're not talking about the use of technology, we're talking about the behavior of the technology specifically, because it's about how we're designing our technology systems to behave. And so the first type of fairness, F1, is the first goal, and it is quality of service fairness. This is one that many people are familiar with. An example of this is the gender shade study that showed that earlier facial recognition systems did not work as well for dark skin as they did for light skin, and were particularly weak at accurately recognizing women with darker skin tones. So this goal is saying that we want systems to be equally accurate for different groups of people. And so now we understand we're looking at accuracy. We can build testing plans, which is exactly what we've done for facial recognition and speech to text, and all of our AI systems where quality of service fairness is what applies, where we can test out AI systems for diverse groups of people and work to improve any inequality in the service. F2, which is allocation fairness, is very similar to F1, except this is the outcome of the system. So if my model or my system is allocating loans or deciding who should get credit, then that would be the decision or the outcome that the system is making. Here we can build a slightly different testing approach for our AI systems. F3 is what's really relevant for generative AI systems. It's about how people are represented in the AI system. We want to ensure that AI systems aren't producing representations of people that are stereotyping, demeaning, or are overrepresenting or underrepresenting people. So we don't want our generative AI application, for example, to only provide users with examples talking about one group of people and pretending a group of people don't exist. And the test for this looks very different than how we test for the F1 types of fairness. But now that we've defined what outcomes we know we need to achieve, we can build out solutions that help improve the performance of our AI systems as well as more robust methodology and tools for testing. Hopefully, this example provides an idea of how our standard has enabled us to start building repeatable practices and tools to help us innovate more quickly and responsibly. So now let's talk specifically about generative AI and what it takes to develop a generative AI application responsibly. When GPT-4 came out and we wanted to develop this new experience in Bing, we had to bring together experts across research and policy and engineering to help develop the responsible AI approach for the new Bing. And of course, we weren't starting from scratch for this. We were building on top of what we had learned with previous generations of OpenAI models and technologies, and from developing GitHub Copilot and Azure OpenAI Service. But since GPT-4 was substantially more powerful and capable than other technologies, there was still more that we needed to do to build on top of that. So we're fortunate in Microsoft to have had these experts across disciplines who helped to develop, test, and launch the new Bing responsibly. But even with all those experts, it would have greatly slowed us down if we had to start off from scratch. And as you can see, we've been moving very quickly, releasing many, many more applications very rapidly after Bing. So how are we doing this? This is not just possible because we have the largest army of experts, right? Though that helps. This pace of innovation is possible because we have discipline in our approach rooted in our standard. When we go in and develop an application like Bing, we're looking at how do we do the responsible AI thing in a systematic way. And then we can take those learnings and build them into our AI development platform so that the next wave of applications are building on top of those same technologies, building on top of the same approach. The way we've been able to release so many of these copilots and support our customers releasing their own generative AI applications is because we're all running on the same platform, which is Azure AI. All of our generative AI applications inside of Microsoft run on Azure AI, and we've built out our responsible AI approach and tooling into that platform to enable responsible AI at scale. Having this common platform has been critical. So what does this mean for you? This means Azure AI is pressure tested and continually getting updated with cutting edge tools. Not only is Microsoft committed to applying AI responsibly in the services we offer, but we're also committed to sharing our learnings and helping our customers and partners build with AI responsibly. It means you can innovate more confidently and design with safety in mind from the beginning, while building on Azure's foundations of enterprise-grade privacy, security, and compliance. So when GPT-4 came out, we brought together a group of experts to test the technology and understand what the potential benefits were. Of course, we also started digging into the potential risks. And we found that there's 4 major categories of harms that we know we need to mitigate when building generative AI platforms. The first is the overall quality of the application. We want to ensure that the application is not producing errors or what people often call hallucinating, which would be like adding additional incorrect information or just sort of making up information. We also needed to make sure that our system is robust to adversarial attacks. And this could be a jailbreak, which is when a user tries to manipulate or confuse the system to get it to produce something that's not supposed to produce, or a new type of attack like a prompt injection attack. And we also took a look at traditional harmful content, whether that is harmful natural language content, for example, or harmful imagery or code that contains security vulnerabilities. Then one of the newer areas that's emerging is that these models can seem very human-like when interacting with end users. So when is it okay for a system to be conversing and acting like a human? And when is that going to be misleading, inappropriate, or even harmful? We're looking across all of these different dimensions which may sound like a lot, but we found that the same technological approach or the same sorts of layers of defenses actually work for each of these different types of attacks. So we can use a common framework across all of these. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So mitigating potential harms presented by these new models requires an iterative layered approach that includes experimentation and measurement. We find that most production applications require a mitigation plan with 4 layers of technical mitigations: the model, the safety system, the meta prompt and grounding, and the user experience layers. The model and safety system layers are typically platform layers where built-in mitigations would be common across many applications. They are built into Azure. The next 2 layers largely depend on the application's purpose and design, meaning the implementation of mitigations can vary a lot from one application to the next. So again, while the foundation model you're using is obviously an important component of the system, it's not the complete system. So let's take a look at each of these layers. At the model layer, it's important to understand the model you'll be using. One of the things that we've seen recently is a lot of innovation to figure out where and how we can bake safety directly into foundation models. For example, working with OpenAI, we've explored techniques like reinforcement learning from human feedback and fine-tuning in the base models to build safety into the model itself. And so starting with ChatGPT and GPT-4, you see safety built into the model to mitigate unwanted behaviors. And of course, many other models available on Azure are providing this. For example, Meta's Llama 2 models are fine-tuned models that have mitigations built in for you so that the model already knows how to look at certain types of sensitive queries and respond appropriately. Now, of course, what you want the base model to do is going to vary based on your application. And so in Azure AI, we have many different foundation models available in our model catalog. Today, you can explore thousands of foundation models from Microsoft, OpenAI, Meta, and Hugging Face, all organized by collection and task. And when you deploy, customize, and use these foundation models through Azure, all of your data and AI models are protected by one of the most comprehensive enterprise compliance and security platforms in the industry. To better understand each model, you can click to view model cards that tell you more about the model's capabilities, limitations, and any measures taken by the model developers to reduce the risk of potential harms. It may be worth experimenting with different versions of the models to see how the harms present differently. So how exactly can you know which model is right for your application? Well, once you've identified some pre-trained models that could work for your use case, you can test them on different benchmarks or queries that represent your application. And the platform's powerful experimentation and tracking capabilities allow you to compare the performance of multiple models side by side to pick the one that would perform best for your use case. At this point, you may also decide to fine-tune a model to improve performance. Since fine-tuning allows organizations to tailor a model to their own data sets, it can be particularly helpful for domains with specialized jargon such as healthcare and law. All of these steps can help you better understand whether a model is a good fit for your application and start identifying the potential harms you need to mitigate and measure during the application development. So choosing a great base model is just the first step. For most applications, it's not enough to rely on the safety mitigations built into the model itself. Even with fine tuning, LLMs can make mistakes and are susceptible to attacks like jailbreaks. So just like security at Microsoft, we use a layered defense in-depth approach, and we apply an AI-based safety system that goes around the model and monitors the inputs and outputs to help prevent attacks from being successful and catches places where the models make mistakes. And so we recently released a new state-of-the-art safety system called Azure AI Content Safety to provide an independent layer of protection. One of the amazing things about generative AI is that it has enabled us to build a much more powerful safety system because we've actually been able to leverage GPT-4 in the development of this to help us train the system and give it more examples of different types of harmful content. Azure AI Content Safety detects the harmful user-generated and AI-generated content using text and image APIs. So customers can deploy Azure AI Content Safety as an intelligent content filtering service as part of their application to comply with regulations and also maintain their intended environment for their end users. We've also integrated this service directly into Azure OpenAI Service and Azure Machine Learning to help developers build safer AI applications from the start. So let's look at how this built-in safety system works in Azure OpenAI. It runs both the prompt and completion for your Azure OpenAI model through an ensemble of classification models built to detect problematic content like hate, sexual violence, and self-harm. In real time, these models can be used to improve the quality of outputs and give customers control over the type and tone of the content in their application. They can also be used to identify potential instances of abuse and alert customers of those concerns and automatically filter them out. Let's take a quick look at a demo.
Azure AI Content Safety is an API-based product that can be deployed as part of any application to monitor for harmful content in real time. I'm in the studio so that we can explore how it works interactively. For the Contoso bot, most people are going to be asking appropriate queries about products they'd like to buy. For example, here's a user query looking for an axe to cut a path in the forest. If we ask Content Safety to score this, we can see that it recognizes it as safe. However, one of the challenges with language is that small changes can completely change the meaning. But the power of new foundation models and Azure AI Content Safety is that it can understand these differences. So if I change even a single word in the sentence and rerun the query, you can see that Azure AI Content Safety understands that this query is not safe and it would reject it. Here, I'm using the default settings, but if I want, I can adjust the severity levels to meet the needs of my application and deploy this through the API in production. Contoso uses Azure OpenAI, so Azure AI Content Safety is already built in. Returning to the Contoso bot, I can test these same queries again. Here, I'm going to start with a recommendation for cutting a path. As you can see, the Contoso bot is prepared to recommend products the customer can buy. However, if I pretend to be a user with the same harmful query as before, I can see the safety systems in action, and my bot knows to reject it, protecting Contoso and its users.
Now, one of the important things we recognize with content filtering is that each application is different. If I'm developing a gaming application, then I may want to be much more permissive in violent language. But if I'm building an education application, I'll probably want to be very cautious in how much content I let through for each harm category. And so the system works by categorizing the content both by the type of harm and also by the severity of the harm from safe to high. And for each response, you'll get a score across each of the categories and a severity level so that you can actually tune this for your own application. So also built into Azure OpenAI, we've got this configurability so that you can actually also choose to change the severity level for your prompts and completions. For example, you might choose to allow medium or high severity levels of harmful content in user inputs, but choose stronger filters for your system's outputs. We provide that flexibility within Azure OpenAI. However, you don't have to use this only in Azure OpenAI. Azure AI Content Safety is also built into Azure Machine Learning, so you can deploy other foundation models with this safety system or directly use the API. Now we're at the application level. Meta prompt design and proper data grounding are at the heart of every generative AI application. Let's explore how these techniques can differentiate your application and support more safe, trustworthy user experiences. With all these models having access to the vast amounts of information they were trained on, how do you differentiate your application? This is where your data becomes really valuable. Because despite their extensive knowledge, these large language models have limitations. First, their knowledge is stale. They're trained only up to a certain point in time. Also, the models only have access to public information. They lack knowledge about anything behind corporate firewalls, private data, or use case specific information. So we need a way to combine general reasoning capabilities of LLMs with specific information relevant to our business use cases. This is where you can use an approach in real time called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, where you enable your model to search your data or to use your data to answer a question. For example, in Bing Chat, when you do a search, the model is looking for search results, and then it reads the search results for better answers to the question. And this is really important because it allows your data to be more fresh and more accurate. We're not relying on the model knowing everything. Instead, we're giving the model the correct answer. Now, the other part of the story is how you teach the model to use that data or to answer the questions effectively in your application. How you craft the prompt or instruct your model can vary the response. The tone and style of the response, which questions it can and can't answer, how confident you need it to be in responses, etc. You're giving these instructions to the model in a natural language to guide its behavior. So your data and your prompt are really where you differentiate your application and your business. Tapping into the trained data of the models is valuable, but enhancing it with your information is critical. This is where data privacy and security also becomes critical. You want to make sure any grounding data you share with the base model is contained within your tenant, remains encrypted, and is entirely within your control. To reiterate, when Microsoft says your data is your data, we mean all the data you use or generate with Azure OpenAI Service is stored encrypted at rest in your organization's Azure subscription. The data is always under your control. And when we say your data is not used to train foundation models, we mean that training data you provide is only used to fine-tune your own model and is not used by Microsoft to train or improve any Microsoft models. Any fine-tuning you do stays in your Azure subscription. When you use retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, to ground your model, the model reasoning over the data or to craft an output, the data is not being used to retrain the model. This is one of the reasons why RAG is such a flexible architecture for building AI applications. And of course, all of your data and AI models are protected by Azure's comprehensive enterprise compliance and security controls. Microsoft 365 Copilot is a great example of a generative AI application that uses an LLM as a reasoning engine on top of relevant contextual data. Here's a brief demo of how it works. So here's an example of what a meta prompt looks like with a conversational agent as an example. At the top, we're spelling out the capabilities that an agent should take on. We say we want the agent to be able to be logical and to reason. We also want the agent to go and search information from our product catalog and other sources to provide more relevant, accurate responses. And then, importantly, we have this safety section. Here it looks simple because this is just a tiny illustration. But what we found in practice is that a meta prompt is incredibly important for safety. Thinking back to all the different types of risks that we talked about earlier, we found it helpful to build a dedicated part of the meta prompt addressing each and every one of them. Let's walk through some examples. The first one here is response grounding. Using retrieval augmented generation, we've given the model access to fresh information, but we can't stop there. We need to ensure that the model uses that information and it only uses that information. And so we call that response grounding. And so here our instructions tell the model to only respond with verifiable statements and references that grounding data. We're also telling the model not to embellish or make any new information up, and this will help make sure that our outputs are trustworthy. There's another section here on tone. So how do you want it to behave? Depending on a company's brand guidelines and the context where users will be interacting with our application, we may want to put guardrails around tone. Here, we're instructing the application to be positive, polite, and engaging, and refuse argumentative discussions. There's another section instructing the model not to produce harmful content, even if the users are pushing for that. Then there's another section dedicated specifically to jailbreaks and adversarial use to help the model not be easily tricked by user manipulation. We want to prevent users from bypassing the application's usage policy measures. So this is all part of the meta prompt for the system prompt. This is something that goes in as part of the program to the model whenever you're calling it. We found that metaprompt is surprisingly powerful and small changes can make a big difference. Let's look at an example from one of the applications that we were developing, where we didn't want this application to produce certain types of content like news or song lyrics or books, for example. At a baseline, when we provided no specific mitigation instructions and we asked the model to request that type of content, we were finding that about 67% of the time it would do it. So how can we mitigate this behavior? There are three main ways. Tell the model it must not do something. Tell the model it must not do something, but do something else instead. And tell the model that if the user requests this kind of content, it should activate some kind of safe mode that only summarizes search results. Our experience suggests that this last approach works best. To prove this point, we ran 79 different queries asking the model to provide a specific quote from a news article and then recorded the results. Using the last mitigation approach, we were actually making errors in less than 1% of the cases. Bottom line, strong metaprompt makes a big difference. We have documentation with more prompt engineering guidance that I'm happy to share at the end of this presentation. We've been learning from experience and don't want everyone to have to go and relearn all of these lessons on their own. The other thing to mention here is the only way we would have been able to figure this out was through a lot of experimentation because we have a metric, right? I wouldn't have been able to tell you that the bottom one is going to be better than the first example without some measurement in place. And we could talk more about built-in evaluations to help you experiment and innovate in a little bit. But first, let's talk about the last mitigation layer here, which is user experience. How do you design the actual application and position it to customers? That's actually incredibly important. A lot of the applications people are thinking about now, are chat applications like Bing Chat. So we'll talk more about Bing as an example, but there are actually a lot of different ways to think about the user experience for generative AI. So for example, in GitHub, Copilot is not an open-ended interface. Instead, the model is just automatically completing people's code and the user can decide to accept it or reject it, right? So it's putting the user in control. So even if the system is making mistakes, users are ultimately in control. We found that this works really well for users and helps overcome a lot of potential mistakes. In the case of Bing, we made quite a few intentional decisions in the user interface. You can see some of it here on the landing page. Like at the top, we provided examples to help users understand what the system, can and can't do, what it's good at. Then we have this middle section where we're informing. Users that the system isn't perfect and it's going to make mistakes. We ask users to fact check outputs and of course share feedback so that we can learn and get better over time. And finally, we added a section where you can choose your conversational style. If you're doing very information-seeking tasks, like how to jumpstart your car, then you can use precise mode, which is really tuned to ensure that we're presenting the information in the most concise and accurate way possible. If you're trying to generate new and novel content, like you're brainstorming ideas for a project, then creative mode is right for you. So you can see we're giving users a choice, and at the same time, we're helping the system understand what they're trying to achieve. We also made intentional decisions when designing the ongoing Bing Chat experience. So for example, we show that it's searching so that people understand where the information is coming from and that the model is going and doing a search. In Bing, we also added references because one of the most important ways in which people understand information is understanding the source of the information. We've all used search engines and know what sources we prefer and trust. Who is providing the information is part of how we think about the authority and how we think about using the information. And so we didn't want to hide that. We also added these suggestions, which again are helping people understand what the system is capable of, what it can do, so that it's not an opaque black box, but it's actually something that they can understand. And so These kinds of design decisions can really influence what end users get out of your system. And so we have a lot of different UX learnings about how to be transparent about what the system does and its limitations, how to ensure that the user stays in the loop, and how to make sure that we're mitigating people over relying on it or even misusing it. Some of the stuff that we've learned is to review and edit interventions. So design the user experience to encourage people who use the system to review and edit the AI generated outputs before accepting them. Also, highlight potential inaccuracies in the AI generated outputs. Make it clear how well the system can do and what it can do, both when users first start using the system and at appropriate times during the ongoing use. In the first run experience, notify users that AI-generated outputs may contain inaccuracies and that they should verify information. Throughout the experience, include reminders to check AI-generated output for potential inaccuracies, both overall and in relation to specific types of content the system may generate incorrectly. For example, if your measurement process has determined that your system has lower accuracy with numbers, mark numbers in generated outputs to alert the user and encourage them to check the numbers or seek external sources for verification. And also user responsibility. Remind people that they are accountable for the final content when they are reviewing AI-generated content. For example, when offering code suggestions, remind the developer to review and test the suggestions before accepting. So all of these recommendations are available in our Hacks toolkit, where you can go and look at different UX patterns and different UX goals. Because of course, each application is going to be different. And so how you apply these patterns will vary based on your application. And the Hacks toolkit is there to help you for that. So that's a lot of different layers, and they need to all work together. The only way that we can confidently and safely ship our application is to evaluate the complete system. And we do this in a couple of different ways. First, we start with a manual approach where we bring together both experts who are coming in and trying to break the system through more sophisticated techniques, which is what we call red teaming, but also people who are just representing average users to help stress test the system. And we have this diverse team manually probe the application. We have them look at different types of topics or different types of harms or risks and prioritize and probe the system for those. Then we look at those results, look at the patterns where the system is still failing, and we use that to improve our mitigations and our evaluations. Because why did we find it in the manual testing, and how can we identify that issue with automated testing? So we use red teaming to identify gaps in our testing methods, as well as to identify gaps in our actual mitigations. And when we're shipping an application, we have week over week sprints of this manual testing process, and we use that to make our system better. But manual testing isn't enough. For example, if we want an automated way to do prompt engineering, from the example I showed you earlier, where we identified the meta prompt that resulted in the fewest errors, that is an automated way to do prompt engineering testing. So the other thing we have is automated or programmatic testing, where we have developed an approach where we can create input sets or test sets that represent these different harms or the different risks that I talked about earlier. We run them through the system and generate outputs, and then we evaluate those outputs, and that results in a metric. So that's how we get to something that says, for example, 12% of the time the system is failing. To accomplish this, we've developed a system, and one of the things we found, again showing the power of generative AI, is that while this level of testing was something that was really hard to do in the past, we're now able to do effective evaluations at scale using GPT-4. Essentially, GPT-4 can help us evaluate the outputs or score a conversation. So we've built metrics based on GPT-4 that can help evaluate an AI system, and we've built these metrics directly into Azure AI for you. So we have a bunch of pre-built evaluations that can help you test these different dimensions in your system as part of Azure AI. In a minute, we'll watch a demo that compares two different meta prompts for a customer chatbot. One has that safety section of the meta prompt built into it, the other does not. We'll see how the built-in evaluation metrics that are based on GPT-4 can score how well this is the system performing and which meta prompt is better. Is it grounded with relevant information? Is it hallucinating? Are the responses relevant? Are they coherent? Let's take a look.
I'm going back to the Contoso retail flow to experiment with the meta prompt and add the safety section I just showed you. Rather than just push it to production, I also want to test it first. Built into Azure AI is a system for testing prompt variants. As you can see, I'm testing 2 variants here. Variant 0 contains the new safety section. Now I'm going to use prompt flow to see how these 2 compare. Prompt flow provides built-in metrics, which makes it easy for me to evaluate. Let's look at the results. First, I'm going to look at the outputs of the system to understand how these 2 prompts stack up qualitatively. I can see immediately that there are differences in how they behave. And if I go to example 3, which is the example of a user trying to jailbreak the system, I can see that variant 0 outperforms variant 1 because variant 0 refuses to give information about its prompt, while variant 1 is successfully jailbroken. Now that I've looked at the examples, I want to understand how these 2 compare overall by looking at metrics. I can see that variant 0 is outperforming variant 1 across the board, with higher scores in groundedness, relevance, and coherence, which means it's the clear winner for me. And now I can confidently deploy to production and bring the power of AI to Contoso.
And so overall, this combination of the repeated mitigation layers that we can use in each application and build into our own platform. And the testing and measurement tools that enable us to confidently test our system before we put it into production are really what makes it possible for Microsoft to develop generative AI applications. I'm going to start this slide over, just FYI, starting over 3, 2, 1. And so overall, this combination of the repeated mitigation layers that we can use in each application and build into our platform, and the testing and measurement tools that enable us to confidently test our system before we put it into production are really what makes it possible for Microsoft to develop generative AI applications. And the great thing is that you, as our customer, get the benefit of all this expertise and work that Microsoft has been doing for years in responsible AI by building on top of Azure AI. Because as you can see, we've built in these different layers and tools directly into our platform. And of course, we're continuously innovating here and trying to bring the latest and greatest things to customers as quickly as possible. We have a lot of different resources available for people today to help you get started wherever you are in your journey with generative AI. Azure AI Content Safety is an Azure service that powers the built-in safety systems we discussed in Azure OpenAI and Azure Machine Learning. You can also use it as a standalone content moderation service for your application as well. Then there's Azure OpenAI Service, which has the latest and greatest OpenAI models, which have safety built in. Azure OpenAI makes it easy to build meta prompts and ground models with your own data. Azure Machine Learning is our comprehensive machine learning platform where you'll find the model catalog, including leading models from Azure OpenAI, Hugging Face, and Meta. You'll also find tools for fine-tuning and prompt flow to help you build your meta prompt and ground your model with data sources and run all those great evaluations to see if your system is performing as expected. On the right side, you'll also see links to other general resources we discussed, like Microsoft's Responsible AI Standard and the HACS Toolkit. We also provide more information about the mitigation layers and the techniques like prompt engineering and red teaming. We're also continuously adding to our catalog of online learning courses, and some courses include labs to provide hands-on experience. As you've seen throughout today's presentation, we believe hands-on learning is the best way to learn and foster collaboration and innovation in the era of AI. Thank you for your time today. I hope this was super helpful, and I appreciate you taking a moment to learn more about responsible AI and generative AI.
Thanks, Dave, for for the session. And so we talked about the why and the what of doing responsible AI. Many of the solutions, and including some of the, I would say, tools are actually available. Some of them are open source as well, and open source on GitHub. So you can use these tools. If you are a startup within Azure, you will have access to these tools. Some of these tools are open source, and obviously a lot of the guides and the content material is also open source, and freely available. We will be actually sending a list of links post this, and with that, actually, I'll move over to Ruth, who will actually talk in detail about how do you actually use this knowledge that you've gained in the frameworks to actually implement. What is the tooling that is available? What are the things that you need to look out? So now that you know the why and the what, she will cover the how, and there will be a bunch of demos that she goes into. So it will be like very pragmatic and hands-on to make this very real and tangible. So with that, I am going to get Ruth on the stage, and over to you, Ruth, and let's start off.
Kubu, and in this session, I'm going to be talking about building responsible AI solutions. To start with, I'm going to be sharing my slides. That's the agenda for today. I'll share my slides. Then we'll also break into demos on some of the information or content that I'll be sharing. So give me a few minutes to bring up my slides. A lot. Okay, so like I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about building AI solutions responsibly. My name is Ruth Yakubu, and I'm a principal cloud advocate at Microsoft. If you need to get a hold of me after this session, you can reach out to me via Twitter, my @ symbol, or my account is Ruthie Yakubu. And if you have any questions, that is the best way to get a hold of me. So for this session, I'm going to begin with talking about the state of AI right now, which is super exciting to everybody listening to this session today. I'm sure this is why you're here. And just in every conversation that we have, we are hearing about OpenAI, ChatGPT, LLMs, and just in AI in general. So the trends that we're seeing today is we see a lot of AI innovations happening at a very rapid rate. We did see this in years before, but I feel like now the breakthroughs are coming at a very rapid rate. And as a result, a lot of companies are accelerating their adoptions of AI. They're allocating their investments in their business processes and also the products and services. In business processes, how can we make ourselves a little more effective in the work that we do? What can we automate so we can focus on more important things as opposed to mundane tasks? Then on the competitive edge, how can we utilize AI for our business to provide good user engagements and also give us a better edge when it comes to our competition? Another thing that we're seeing in this excitement of AI is society expectation. So society expectation is evolving. For the first time, I feel like almost everybody has some kind of opinion about AI. And the bottom line in most of the conversations that you hear whether it is through maybe community engagements, friends, or maybe your grandparents are talking about ChatGPT. So we're seeing a lot of societal expectations on AI and the need for it to be regulated. Another aspect of things is governments are starting to step in and talk about AI and also talk about how can we better govern AI. So you're sitting here wondering, okay, how is this important to me? So if you're a startup, this is very crucial to you because all of this applies to either your business process or the expectations of your customers or partners. And we'll go into details further. So similar to how I mentioned about society expectation, we are seeing in the news almost on a daily or weekly basis something about AI, whether the use of AI where AI is utilized in some kind of um, one of the industries divisions, or it could be the misuse of AI. So those are the mix that we're seeing, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. So the question a lot of people have been asking is, okay, we talk about responsible AI, but why responsible AI? So when it comes to responsible AI, we are referring to fairness, accountability, transparency, security, um, and accountability, reliability, and safety as well. So all of these culminate the different principles within responsible AI. Why is this important? Because you feel like a lot of people understand these principles and feel that, yes, it is important, but why are people making such a big deal? Is it just a slogan that we're putting out there? Responsible AI is important because we constantly see AI systems that are being built missing the mark. That's number one. So the way it was intended, it could have individual society harms, but depending on what the use case is. Another thing is with this new rapid breakthrough in AI, another challenge is, okay, is exposing new challenges that we may not have thought about maybe last year, but this year we're it's on the forefront of issues that we need to take into account when it comes to AI. And I feel like AI is a moving goalpost when it comes to the different areas that can fall short. So you may have a solution that has working well for years, but let's say there's a new influx of incidents where we have deepfake, where let's say your voice or your image or your liking is being presented, but it's in a synthetic way, so it's not true. So that poses security issues. So how can we catch and mitigate those issues in our new AI systems that we're building, or the ones that we already have existing? Then kind of like how I mentioned, governments are also now stepping in. The good thing is there are some industries that are a little further than others. So for example, healthcare and financial services. I think this is also very important, especially if you're a startup, you're have like maybe a B2B solution, or you're working in any of these spaces. These are spaces that are regulated. So responsible AI compliance is something that you're going to run into. And in terms of B2B situation, it could make or break your business deal. So the question for everybody is, depending on what hat you wear, is how is this important? How does this, what does all of this mean to me? If you're a machine learning or AI developer, you're wondering, yes, I do agree in all of these principles. I do agree that, yes, we do need some way to regulate AI, but I don't have the tools to go about debugging or catching areas that could potentially harm end users. And we'll go more into details around that. We find our decision makers are using AI insights and analytics to also make business decisions. So the question is, are we giving them reliable analytics, AI and analytics, or the AI systems that we have there? Are they reliable enough for stakeholders and business decision makers to make decisions off? So that's one of the problems that decision makers are worried, and it's on top of their mind. The end users engaging with AI, if you're a business or a consumer, yeah, dealing with AI, improving end user trust is very important, because depending on what your AI system does can make or break you. So if you put out a solution out there that has a glitch, it's not reliable, it could taint your brand and make it no longer reliable. The next thing is the question that a lot of developers have. Let's say you have a solution that engages with end users. So how do I go out there and ensure that, yes, the content that I'm putting out there is not harmful to individuals or harmful to society? So the very exciting thing that Microsoft has come up with is a solution called the Azure Content Safety. It integrates perfectly with the Azure OpenAI service, and also any other APIs where you have text or images coming in, and you want to put safeguards around it to make sure you are catching anything that could be harmful before the end user sees it. The good thing is it's also supported in different languages. So let's show a quick demo on how this is implemented, or how this service works. Okay. Let's see. So I'm going to share my next screen. Which is the AI content service. So the very first thing when you come to the AI content or Azure Content Safety Studio is you are going to be presented with different options. So if you're dealing with text, you have a way to try out the text that you have. If you have images, you have a way to also moderate those images in real time. So for our test, we can test, open the portal and see if we can do a test. So let's see. Let me type a phrase. So let's assume for OpenAI instances, this is like a prompt that I'm putting out there, and let's see what the response is. So what are dental, better yet, what is the process of removing a wisdom tooth? So let's see what it brings out, because I know wisdom tooth can be gory. One thing I didn't go into details is the very different categories that you're looking to catch is violence, if your content has violence, if it has self-harm, if it has sexual explicit content, and if it has hate. So let's see what it brings out. Okay, so we run this. I was hoping it provides some kind of response that would be classified as like when you have removing a wisdom tooth, it is a bloody scene. So it didn't catch that as a scenario that is gory or something that can inflict self-harm. So let's try another one. Who is the author of To Kill a Mockingbird? I think this is 2 words. Let's try 2 words. Okay, that's acceptable. So the next thing we can do is play around with the different settings in terms of what we should classify as harmful. So let's remove it from high, medium, or low, and say, okay, only accept content that comes in that you think is safe. So let's run that. For some reason, it does think this is a safe phrase. The next thing is what can I use with a chain Oh, better yet, who was the main character in the movie Chainsaw Massacre? Okay. So let's see. Okay, so this is a good example where it does look at both the prompts that we have and also the responses that we have. So depending on what level that you have for it to catch anything that may be appropriate or not. So you have low, medium, and high. For me, I'm saying, okay, accept things that are, anything that comes in that you think is safe. I'm putting it on a very high level. So any content that comes, this is the severity level that it comes back, and it'll be able to tell me that, okay, for what you just put in there, whether it's a prompt or a response, should we reject it? Or if we're rejecting it, what are the reasons why? So if you can see, even though we're talking about a movie and a character that I'm trying to get from this famous movie, there are certain keywords like chainsaw and massacre that can be depicted as violence. So it did reject that. And under the category, it gave us a reason why that was rejected. So this is how, before you implement your solution and you want to do small tests to figure out, okay, how can I play around with understanding the outcome or the severity levels that are returned. From a phrase. This is a good studio to play around, and also with the different configurations when it comes to the filtering, high, medium, or low. This is how to go about testing your model. Another thing is we are going to be or you are going to be interfacing with OpenAI a lot. So with OpenAI, we do have the ChatGPT. You put in a prompt, it does give you a response. So the very good thing about the studio is as you're creating your studio and you're bringing in your models, one thing that you can do is you can deploy your models in the deployments tab. Then another thing you can do when it comes to content filter is you can create a content filter. So give it a unique name. It still has a integration of the content filter functionality. And sure enough, you can specify what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, or how strict it should enforce some of the content coming in. So the good thing is not just what the user, the generative AI is returning back from the user, is also the prompt that the user is also entering. We want to also make sure it is putting safety guardrails around that to make sure the prompts are also appropriate. So you can configure both the prompt and the responses. Once you have that, give it a unique name and save it. Once you save that, it'll be available here. I already have an existing one that I created and put the different safety levels on it. So as I'm running my chat, so this is another good way of, if you have a chat GPT type of scenario or application and you want to test it out, this is a very good playground to play around with the responses and also the different scenarios that you have in your model or your domain use case that you want to test whether, okay, is this appropriate? Because you could be a business that deals with hardware and people are coming to buy maybe chainsaws or what's it called? Axes or other what's it called? Merchandises that may be at risk at being flagged as violent or potential of causing some kind of harm. So those are good use cases where you can go in and be able to check to see whether this is going to catch, it's going to violate or it's safe for you to release a chatbot out there to the users. So on the dentist topic, one thing we can test is we can ask who, or better yet, what is, we'll go back to books. What is Harper Lee's most important, excuse me, book? So Harper Lee is a famous author, and he's the author To Kill a Mockingbird. So I put this example because there's it can easily be a blurry line because the name of the book is To Kill a Mockingbird, so that's potentially violence and harm. So in this case, the chatbot was able to understand the context and understand the title of a book and was able to allow us to use that prompt and a response. So let's try another area. So now I'm going to go back to my favorite dentist scenario. So I'm going to say, give me advice to to better yet, what advice would you give a child to remove their wisdom? Okay, if I can type this morning, tooth or teeth. So let's see what it provides. So this is On a high level, it is smart because it's saying as an AI assistant, it cannot provide medical advice or recommendations around removing a wisdom tooth, especially for a child. But it then follows up on the procedures of removing a wisdom tooth. So it's kind of good. This is outside of the guardrails that we put out there. So we know that when you remove your wisdom tooth, it is kind of a gory, bloody thing. So let's see if we can trick it. So give me advice to make my teeth bleed. If I can spell teeth. Okay. So we do know that, okay, there are different, if I was in the context of, let's say this is a dentist's office and I go to the virtual machine, virtual assistant, and I'm chatting with them and I want to have proper hygiene and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what are the different ways if I don't take care of my teeth that can make my teeth bleed. So I'm asking, okay, give me advice on what are the different ways of making my teeth bleed. Um, when we enter that, this is an example of this content filter that we already integrated within the Azure OpenAI Studio. It was able to read that and the response that it would have catch or even the prompt that we put there. It was able to look at the prompt and see that, yes, this is not appropriate. And what is the reason? Is showing that this is something that can potentially cause self-harm. So those are some of the areas that you have toolings as a developer, or if you have a startup or business, or you're just a developer, you have all this generative AI, you have prompts, you have responses. Sometimes we can't even control the responses that we get back. This is a very good tool that you can configure and put different thresholds depending on your business on what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, that sort of thing. So you can play around with that. The good thing is after you're done, you can deploy it into a model depending on the data that you also have, if you have customizable data. So let's look at the code-wise. This is not just something that you can implement on, what's it called? On a, excuse me, on a console and always have it put in the restrictions that you want. You can also do it programmatically. So this is for your developers to easily utilize. And so far as you can see, you don't need to be a machine learning expert. It's pretty intuitive. But you can also give it to your developers and say, okay, developer, we have a system that is customer facing. It may be a chatbot, a virtual agent that takes Q&A from end users. Whatever the scenario is, is connecting to the client. So you create a client connection to authenticate to that endpoint for content safety. And for me, the example of a prompt that I'm using is for OpenAI to give me a summary of John Wick's role in the movie John Wick. So that would be my prompt. You can enter whatever other prompts that you have. You can set the number of tokens. So like, okay, how long do you want the responses to be? The temperature. In our case, we are using completions, but also when you notice in the studio, I don't think I pointed it out. You do have completions, which is older support. We now have the chat completions, but either way, you can utilize the object you're gonna configure your OpenAI settings and specify the temperature, all the different parameters for your OpenAI. So that's what this completions object is all about. Once you have that, you add it to your client. Then the next thing is calling that client with the text that you specify or the prompt that you specify. That's on the Open AI front. The next thing is, okay, you do, from the client, you did invoke the service. So what is the next thing to do? You need to specify the different areas that you wanted to catch. You can specify, depending on your domain, you can say, I only want to catch any content that has hate or sexual explicit content. But in our case, we're adding everything. So that's what that is for. Once you have that, you do run it against put it in the body of the request and send it to the content safety object to be executed. So you send it to the request to the client. It is going to return a response in an object. So it's a matter of looping through the object and seeing what the response is. So in this one, I chose to use Java. And remember, what is the prompt that we put in there? We're asking it to give a summary of John Wick's role in the movie, John's role in who is the main character in the movie, John Wick. So when we run this, and let's scroll down as it's running. See. Okay, we'll have to run it again. That's the beauty of using generative AI. Sometimes the results are not as consistent. Okay, but this kind of gives you a gist. Initially, when I ran the same code, it was able to break down in terms of the text to give the role, the high level of his role, and talking about what went on in the movie and the revenge that he's trying to seek after his dog is killed. So as you can see, it is a violent movie, action movie. So let's look at the response that the content filtering was able to catch. So when you're dealing with a content filter, when you call it, it is going to return a JSON file. So all the different fields that you specify that, yes, for this category, I want you to catch any violation. It's going to go through each category. So under hate, it will tell you, okay, whether or not it found any violation and the severity level. So under hate, it did not find any violations. Under self-harm, if you know the movie, there is a caught evidence of self-harm, and it gave the severity. Under sexual explicit content, it did not find anything. And under violence, let's see, which the movie, it's action movie, it did find a severity level. So kind of like how we saw in the console, when I ask, okay, what are ways to make my teeth bleed? It automatically did not even give a result. It just was able to block that statement and give reasons why it blocked that statement and gave the category that it was self-harm. So this gives you the opportunity of, number one, in your application, being able to grab instances where there's a violation, look at the severity. And from the severity, you can make a decision on how you want to mitigate the problem. So now let's go back to the presentation. Excuse me. So, excuse me, apologize. So yeah, in the section that we just covered, it covered OpenAI service that you're going to be utilizing. There's always questions around, okay, how can I add content filtering to make sure none of the outputs that I'm putting out there, I'm reducing the number of harmful content and also detecting them. The good thing is the support comes in both text and images, kind of like how I mentioned before. And the supported languages are also English, German, Japanese, and so on. So you can play around with that. So next, under the generative AI umbrella, we are dealing with a lot of LLMs. That's a good thing. The good thing is we already have pre-trained models in a certain area. We can just utilize the LLMs, the open source LLMs that are out there, and maybe plug into our business and just use it as it is. But one of the things that it poses a problem is this is all fun. It's great that we do now have information available that can provide insightful information for us to make decisions or be creative in our area or our industries. But the question is, a traditional way of that we had before when we were dealing with machine learning, training machine learning models, is we had control over the data that we had, or some control. We kind of knew what domain it fell in, the context it came in, and what was in the data. When you're dealing with LLMs, these are large models that the data was extracted from different sources that we don't know. Yes, LLMs are excited, generative AI, all of that is excited, but we also have to be mindful that we still need to have some kind of supervision. We can't blindly use these and call it a day, given the fact that we did not have control of where the data is. But in most cases, the data is pretty good. So that's a disclaimer. So one of the challenges that a lot of developers or data scientists or end users that are engaging with a lot of these large language models that are available to them is, okay, how can I spot any bias? Because at the end of the day, this is my product that I'm putting out there. If something happens, I'm potentially going to be liable. What is my content potentially going to be putting out toxic information? Am I fulfilling any regulatory compliance? Is my data hallucinating? So hallucinating meaning it is providing me information quite okay, but is it information that I can trust? Because a lot of these hallucination examples, it'll give you a response quite okay and references, and it looks amazing, especially as it's providing you good references. But the question is it correct? It's probably not correct. And it's probably not in your domain of work that you're dealing with. It probably grabbed, pulled that information from somewhere else. So that's another area. Then we have to also make sure, depending on the business that we're running, how is the data that was generated or presented to the end user related to maybe the dental clinic that I have, or the unique business that I have? How is it grounded? How can we just say, okay, going forward, any question that somebody asks you, do not provide any response if it doesn't fall within our business domain. So these are the challenges that developers, data scientists, businesses, startups have to deal with. Okay, so that's a little too fast. So let's go into another demo. So you bring that down and launch another video. So with this one, I'm going to cover some of the solutions that are out there when it comes to dealing with large language models that are available to us to utilize. So let me share my screen real quick. Okay. So when we're dealing with large language models, there are a lot of factors that come into play. The good thing is, number one, you probably need an existing LLM. So the good thing about when you go into the Azure Machine Learning Studio, you do have access to some of the open source large language models that are out there that you can utilize. Or if you need to fine tune some of those models with your data, you can also do that. We also have a very useful tool called Prompt Flow. And basically what Prompt Flow is, it helps you with your prompt engineering. So all the different concerns that I shared with you, these are areas that you can mitigate and introduce some of the responsible AI practices that are out there. So number one, when you're creating a flow, you can click on create. You can choose a standard flow that you want to utilize, chat flow, evaluation flow. There are galleries that, depending on where your use case is, you can choose like a Wikipedia Q&A, just ask questions, it gives you an answer, or a chat, web classification, and you can also build upon this. So it's a classification type of model. If you want to change it into another classification use case, it's very easy to do. So let me give you an example. Oh, and also if you're dealing with, what's it called? Vector databases, you can do so. The good thing is you can just clone one of these models, give it a name. And it already generated some kind of flow with your LLM and like a JSON Python code to probably process the configurations that you have for your large language models, maybe the prompt and the response, how you want it to be laid out. The good thing is you can also go inside the code and also tweak it or enhance it. If you need to create any other entities down here in your flow, you can do the same. If you want more toolings besides LLMs and Python, you can go and, oh, great, it's not showing, but you have other services available for you to utilize. So that's number one. Number two is you are going to be running these LLMs, so you can check the status. The most important thing is also you are dealing with a lot of connectors. So this is very useful. A lot of things you don't need to go and hard code it. Once you bring in the connector, you have access to the service. So this is the service that I have for Azure OpenAI, because for some of the sample demos that I have out there are using OpenAI content filtering. I brought that in because some I'm going to be utilizing. So whatever additional connectors that you have, you can go ahead and select that. If you also have custom connectors, maybe to other open source, you can totally do that. Runtime, to run all of these flows, you need a compute and a runtime environment. So that's what this is. This is for instances where you have raw data and you want to create like a vector database. In order to do vector search, it's very straightforward. You'll be able to give it a name, specify the location of your data, select the type of vector indexing that you want for the vector database, that sort of thing. And as you navigate through, it'll ask you more questions in terms of what's it called? What your data is, and it'll also kick off the process. You have a compute, so it will show you how it's building the embedding based upon your data. So if you have like a Excel sheet with different columns, it'll build embedding off of that and indexing. So when you're able to query your model, you do have that available for you. So those are the different things that are available in prompt flow. Another area, I know we're getting close to time. So I'll show you an example of different things that you can do. You can specify your input, the outputs. The good thing is everything is visual. You can follow through how the different processes of how you want to configure your LLMs, where you have to define the structure or process some of the input or output data that's coming in and how you want to present to the user. So all of those are the different steps that are there. Let's say at the end of all of this, I want to add another section that processes, let's say, Azure Content Safety. I can totally go in there and add a Python, or the toolings are still not showing. So yeah, play around with this, but if I want all those connectors that we use, similar to machine learning, have your what's it called? Training model separate. Have your test model separate. So if you have data that you want to test to see how well your model is going, you can also go in here and specify your data and the mapping that it should map to. So that's what we're doing in the test data. The next thing is very, very crucial, because the question is, when you're dealing with large language models, we need to evaluate it. We need to find out how accurate or how well is it doing. So this is areas where it's pretty powerful for prompt flow to be able to provide that information for you. So here, the method, you have different things to choose from. So if you have like a Q&A, okay, your answers, how do you want your answers to be? So questions, answers, you may prefer that, okay, evaluate my model based upon the similarities. How close was it to the real answer? So that's that. The classification. If you have like a classification type of use case, okay, I want to look at the accuracy. I want to look at the precision score. I want to look at the F1 score, that sort of thing. If you have a chatbot, okay, same thing, groundedness. You brought in your own data that you want your business for the chat. You want your business only to utilize that data that's pertaining to your business. If anybody asks any questions that's out of scope, how well is your model doing in telling people things that it does not need to be telling them? So that's how you specify how the different options, depending on your use case, how to validate your model to see how well that is doing. And this is very hard if you're to do this yourself. Then the next thing is you want to specify, okay, what column should I look at? So the output that the user puts in an output, but the category is actually the output. So you can specify what the groundedness should be, what field, the category, and also the predicted. What column has the predicted field? So if you click on this, you can see the different options that are there. Do you want to look at the URL, or are we looking at the category that is actually being what the output is? Once you have all of that, you save and you run it. So coming back to this, the good thing is we were able to run a whole bunch of other tests. So you can see the overview of how well your run is, the outputs. So the different runs that you did, the different data that you provided, because given the URL that somebody provided, it's just the output is predicting whether the type of data is in the URL. So is it PDF, profile, movie, that sort of thing. The very important thing that you will need is when you run your model, you need to figure out how accurate it is. So this is the accuracy score because we wanted to evaluate our model to see how accurate it is. So this is how we evaluate the models. So we have covered how to do content filtering, to make sure we don't have content that's going out to the end user that is harmful, violent, causes self-harm, that sort of thing. And another area is, okay, how can we evaluate the accuracy of our model, that sort of thing. You can take it to next level. Is it giving relevant information, that sort of thing. So that's information on evaluating our LLMs. So let me stop sharing that screen. Okay, so all of this, since we're in the stage of working with generative AI, large language models, it is very important to also keep responsible AI top of the mind, making sure the content that we put out there is not harmful to end users, is trustworthy. But the most important thing, whether you're a developer or a company, the impact is it also carries a reputation of your business or you as a developer. Are you putting things out there that are trustworthy for end users to utilize? So going back to our slide, we can conclude. So give me a few minutes. Awesome. So to wrap up our conversation, as you saw through the different capabilities of the prompt flow, it provides a very good, intuitive, user-friendly navigation to evaluate and mitigate some of the issues that your model will have. So first, we covered content safety, which is very needed anytime that you're putting out images or content out there. Under Azure Machine Learning, we covered prompt flow. The area that we did not cover is Responsible AI Dashboard, but there's a very nice tutorial that will walk you through that. This is for people that are building their machine learning from scratch, the traditional way. So how can you, even if your model is saying it's 90% accurate, how do you figure out areas or demographic where your model is being inaccurate? How can you look at your data exploration distribution? Is it overrepresented or underrepresented? That's where inclusiveness problems come in and fairness problems come in and biases come in. So there's a section for that. The traditional way we rely on in evaluating models is through calculations. The good thing about this is it actually works on the data, points directly within your data and the demographic of the data that you can debug and figure out where the problems are. Yes, the calculations are still important, but you can utilize in the model overview to see where the disparities are when you compare the different metrics. Let's say accuracy, precision, recall, that sort of thing, depending on the type of model that you have. For transparency, we also need to figure out what are the key features driving your model's prediction. Maybe the top 5 predictors of somebody being approved for a loan, maybe the features that it's going by is maybe age, gender, um, um, let's say, other sensitive features. When you see things like that, those are telltale signs that, okay, my model is not reliable because these are not characteristics to go by to approve somebody's loan. You are able to also go on a granular level and also be able to pinpoint exactly for a given individual why did something happen or why did the model misbehave or behave. So if a loan was rejected and you're being audited for that particular individual, it provides all the information around that. So there's so many sections within the Azure Responsible AI dashboard that is amazing. I don't know how to express amazing, but it is amazing. And I highly recommend the audience to check that out. The good thing is we have an 8-part tutorial series. They're in small bite size to give you an idea of what is going on. So what does this mean to you? Now that you've listened to the session, you should have all the information that you need to equip yourself to producing solutions that are responsible or have AI, responsible AI. These are the resources that are available for you for content safety, for prompt flow, and the
Vinayak, are you back? Yeah, you are. Sorry, we had a little disconnection
Yeah,
here.
I think, yeah. Sorry about that. I think there was a blip in my internet. Thanks to Ruth and Deb, who actually talked about the different aspects of um, of of responsible AI. And with that, I just wanted to talk about a couple of things. So I think there were a lot of links and a lot of context. This recording will also be published on the YouTube site, and you will be sent a link to the recording and all of the links. So rest assured, whatever links you saw on the screen, we will make sure that we get you to them. We would also want you to actually help us with the feedback. If you can just put uh, if you can just scan and send us the feedback. I think what would you like more, what else would you like us to cover? If you have any questions, you can actually connect with your Azure pairing session. We have kind of flashed the link. It's also there on the chat. With that, any final comments, AC, that you want to talk about? Let me get you on stage. Okay. I think that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed the session, and yeah, as I said, we will hopefully have another other sessions based on your feedback. So your feedback is valuable. Just send it to us, and we'll take it on from there. So thank you. Have a good day, everyone.